What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and as many of you have alerted me to, and I am aware of, the D&D survey for the first of the One D&D Playtest, the character origins, is now available for us to fill out. If you're unaware, the first of the Unearthed Arcana that's going to cover the new playtest material that comes into effect possibly in the final version in 2024 that was released back on the 18th of August was released yesterday, the 1st of September, and runs until September 15th. So if you have any comments, concerns, or things you want to bring up about the new backgrounds, races, feats, or any of the new rule changes, I'm looking at you, people who are really upset about critical hits, this is the time to make your opinions known. So let's go ahead and talk about how we go about doing that, and we'll fill it out together, or I'll fill it out, you can fill it out later, but you'll get my opinion. Also, you guys have continued to drive up that subscriber count number, and I continue to thank you for that. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It's a little click for you, and it does a hell of a lot for me. All right, so here we go. Go to D&D Beyond. Excuse me, One D&D Playtest materials. Scroll down. I assume this area will populate with other contents as we get more Unearthed Arcana in the future. Character origins. Scroll down to the bottom. Here's where you can download the PDF itself, and then where you can click to take the survey. Now, I had already started this and was interrupted, so we'll start it back over again, right? Would you like to playtest this material? Yes, I would. What was the first edition of D&D that you played? Third edition. Now, this is 4% of the survey, so I don't know how long this is actually going to be, and don't know how much we're actually going to be able to devote to each section. But if we continue going on, we can see here, have you had the opportunity to playtest any of this material? Now, the answer for me, unfortunately, is no. I did attempt on multiple games. Some got canceled, some did not, and some games, the folks weren't keen with doing playtest. And that's sort of a problem that I have because, I would like to playtest. I enjoy the Unearthed Arcana, I always have. I playtested a bunch of different things. The original Hexblade from Unearthed Arcana, the original OG version of the Artificer that was really, really bad. I played through that for a long time. I enjoy playtesting, and I enjoy giving playtest feedback, as you can see by the fact that so many of you came out to tell me, hey, did you know the survey's out there? Make sure you go fill it out, because that's something that I stress, is that if you are playtesting, you need to make sure you provide honest but also usable feedback. If all you do is write in every section where they ask you to explain something that this is garbage and you should feel bad about yourselves, that doesn't help them at all. But if you tell them, hey, I really like the way you handled this, but I think this could use some improvement, and here's some examples, that goes a long way. And one, it also doesn't just beat down the devs and make them feel like crap. It also gives them something to utilize. So that's why I really sincerely hope that you do give this honest feedback. I'm also thinking about I'm in the process of sort of re-upping and reactivating my Start Playing account, and I'm thinking and wondering if people would be interested in just playing playtest games, where like I would set up either a one-shot or something, and the whole purpose of it is just to playtest whatever the new Unearthed Arcana is. Because so many of the groups, again, that I tried to get playtests up and running with were established groups with a lot of gameplay behind it, or folks that just didn't feel comfortable utilizing playtest material because it's always ever changing. So you kind of need to find people that are willing to do whatever they can to try the playtest, to break the playtest, and, do that kind of QA. And I'm hoping that maybe if I set up games with the sole purpose of only doing that, that'll get a lot of feedback and people will be interested in joining that. All right, so going through the actual races, now having looked at the human, I think the human I'm very satisfied with, right? It basically does everything that our original human used to do, and then some, right? I love the new inspiration mechanic. They get access to that once a long rest. That's a kind of a fun little thing. And they still get access to their feet. Now, the Ardling, I put satisfied here because, honestly, with the Ardling, I didn't think we needed a new race. In my opinion, at least maybe this is, pre-edition bias, that the Aasimar were sort of the celestial counterpart to the sort of infernal Tiefling. They were sort of, I thought they were opposite ends of the spectrum, sort of the good holy angel base versus this sort of infernal devil based. But apparently that's where Ardling came from, is to fill in that sort of antithesis to the Tiefling. Now, maybe I think they may have existed in previous edition books, so they're not a wholly brand new race. And they're kind of interesting in the fact that they are sort of like Egyptian god-esque, in that they're a bipedal creature that has sort of the head of a given animal. I just thought Aasimar kind of filled that role, and in some ways there are a lot of similarities to Aasimar in that one, their whole sort of base mechanic thing seems to be flight. Now, not every Aasimar has flight, but these ones, flight is sort of their limited flight that they have here. They also get resistance to radiant damage, whereas Aasimars get resistance to radiant and necrotic. And then they have their sort of celestial legacy. Now, Aasimar don't have a direct, they have some healing, and they have like a cantrip. These ones are getting kind of what seems to be a standard thing we're seeing across the board. At first level, you get a cantrip. At third level, you get a first level spell. And at fifth level, you get a second level spell. So I just don't love the race itself, honestly. But I recognize that it is a very powerful and very versatile race. And ultimately, it provides options. And for me, options in Dungeons and Dragons is my favorite thing. Now, I realize some people may get overloaded if they have too many different things to choose from, and I understand and respect that, but I love poring over countless tomes, trying to come up with that ultimate crazy build, whether it's I take one aspect of one class and go hard on trying to make it like the whole defining feature of this character, or take what I know to be a suboptimal class, race, subclass, and find ways to build a bunch of things into it to make it actually really useful. And that was some of the favorite things I used to do back in 3.5. I would spend hours just trying to come up with a build by sifting through every 3.5 book I had. So more options on the table is huge for me. And honestly, if I'm going for a purely statistical advantage, the fact that I could be an idyllic Ardling and play a wizard and have access to guidance and bonus action healing word that I can use with my spell slots means that I now have access to basically a wizard with one of the best cantrips in the game in guidance, and then a bonus action healing that I can do pretty consistently as a wizard, which is pretty sweet. Again, not to be the other two, pretty useful. Again, Cure Wounds, also useful. Divine Favor, again, even if this is only on a race that can do this once per long rest, Divine Favor on a fighter, especially at low levels, just adding a d4 radiant damage, and then pairing that with Action Surge could go a long way. Dragonborn. I'm going to actually put that I'm very dissatisfied. And I'm putting that because I thought they did such a good job, or I should say a better job, in what they did in Fizzbands. And I just don't understand. Fundamentally, I'm confused, and I don't understand why. I understand that we were redoing all of the Dragonborn, or all of the races from the player's handbook. That makes sense to me. That's what your goal in this was. Fix all of the, or update all of the player's handbook races. But when you basically just did that with Chromatic, Metallic, and Gem Dragons and Fizzbands, and then you go ahead and do it again here in this, and in my opinion, make it nothing but worse, what's the goal here, right? That's my question. So we have, you pick your ancestor type, right? It's either, for here, it's only Chromatic or Metallic. Again, ignoring the Gem Dragons, but they were covered in Fizzbands. You get a breath weapon. It's only a 15-foot cone. I can't remember if the other ones had line or cone options, but it is an action now. Now, I will come out and say that we still don't know how the mechanics look. We don't know what actions and fight mechanics look like. So this being an action, perhaps it's not all that bad. But in Fizzbands, it was if you have an attack, you could replace one of your attacks when you use the action with a breath weapon. So if I have a fighter and I have 2 attacks, I could still swing with my weapon and then replace my subsequent... Sorry, my phone keeps buzzing. I put that on silent. Put it, I can supplement my secondary attack with a breath weapon, which makes it much more useful because I can still do other things rather than locking myself down. Now, if I'm a spellcaster, it's not as useful because I could be casting a spell instead. Now, I will say the damage buff is nice. It's a d10 plus your character level, which is a nice static number, which could eventually be a d10 plus 20 damage if you use this all the way at 20th level. But I'll be honest, you probably won't, because it'll start to be outclassed pretty quickly. And the fact that it is a d10 is kind of, again, at early levels, this will be quite powerful, but it will start to trail off in damage. It is proficiency bonus times per long rest, which I do appreciate. That is one of the complaints that I've had in the past, is that Dragonborn had this whole cool thing that they could only do so few times. It wasn't really worth it. You get resistance to your ancestry type, which is fine. It gets you option to resist some things that you might not normally be able to resist easily. You get dark vision out to 60 feet, which, hey, at least they threw them that bone. And this is, I think, at least in the player's handbook, I think the only race that gets a bonus language and in the form of Draconic. Now, reminder that the way races are changing in 1D&D and background, so that everybody starts with 3 languages. In this case, as a Dragonborn, you'd start with 4. But because of the confusion and the fact that Fizzbands is still better, you get a very dissatisfied. Now, the Dwarf, I'm going to put that I am very satisfied with. The Dwarf, I think they did a pretty good job of... now, I did see a lot of people complaining about, like, why is there no sub-races for Dwarves? And part of the reasons that they said that, and if you watch that video with Jeremy Crawford, he said that the differentiations between Dwarves are more cultural than actual biological, and that's why there is no sub-race of Dwarf. A Mountain Dwarf and a Hill Dwarf, it's literally, or a Gold Dwarf and a Shield Dwarf, however you want to define them. It was basically either their station or where they physically lived, but it didn't have any sort of magical connection to make them drastically different, like an elf between a drow, a wood elf, or a high elf, having different sort of magical lineages that changed that. It was basically just cultural and kind of like almost nomenclature based. It wasn't like, we're just going to call you this, but fundamentally we're no different. So they said, why, rather than have to differentiate that, we'll just make the Dwarf and we'll kind of take the best of both worlds. And I do ultimately think that that's where we landed, right? Dark Vision, you still have the poison resistance and advantage on saving throws versus poison. You get, what is it, the Hill Dwarf has the +1 hit point at every level, so you're going to get that. That's huge. Then you get Forge Wise, which is a tool proficiency with 2 tools from the following list: Jewels, Mason, Smith, or Tinkers. So 2 tool proficiencies. And the newer version of Stone Cunning, which is way better than ever Stone Cunning ever used to be, which was as a bonus action, you can gain Tremor Sense up to 60 feet for 10 minutes. You must be on a stone surface to use it. And its bonus action can be used proficiency bonus times per long rest. And it fits into their archetype of they want all of the races to have like an active thing that they can do. Now, I do feel like the human kind of flies right in the face of that because they don't really have an active thing that they can do. But either way, they do get the inspiration, and depending on the feat you choose, maybe you'll get it that way. But yeah, I like this. I mean, they do lose out on the armor proficiency, which was a nice way to get armor proficiency on someone who wouldn't normally have it. Like if you wanted to have medium armor proficiency as a wizard, you could be a dwarven wizard. But I think ultimately this gets kind of the best of both worlds, and I'm okay with simplifying things down a little bit. For the elves, I'm also going to say I'm very satisfied. I love elves personally. Always been a big fan of playing elves. It probably stems back to, being an archer my whole life and being enamored with Lord of the Rings when it came out, and just watching how they gave Legolas all the cool stuff to do, like all the flips and the sliding on the shield and down the elephant and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where my love of elves and the whole kind of general wood elves, foresty nature, and me growing up and being a woodsy kid, hunting, fishing, all that kind of stuff. There's a personal connection there. So I'm fully understanding that I'm providing my personal bias into this. But you know what? They want my honest feedback. I'm going to give them my honest feedback. I personally love elves, and I like what they did here. So you still retain your elven dark vision. Oh, I also have to say that I really appreciate that they just did this whole piece at the top. It makes it nice and clean, right? Creature type, size, speed, lifespan. Nice little quick hit block at the top. I don't need flavor, flowery text about why elves live 750 years in the section in the lifespan. Just give me that little stat block. Gives me all I need. We can move on to the next bit, all right? So you choose your elf lineage. Again, we talked about how it's a little bit more supernatural in nature, and it provides a similar to what we saw with the Ardling. Something at first level, a first level spell at third level, a second level spell at fifth level. I also like how they did it with the elves, because it wasn't necessarily just a cantrip. It was like a cantrip plus, and I do appreciate that. Which does also kind of, I guess that sort of offsets the resistance that the Ardling gets, because in some way I feel like the elves made out a little bit better than the Ardling. While the Ardling does have limited flight, the elves get dark vision, they get the Fey ancestry, right? Advantage on saving throws to avoid or end the charm condition on yourself. They get proficiency in perception, and they get trance. Plus, they get these 3 kind of like spells, but again, at the first level of each one, they get something extra. So the drow get dark vision to 120 feet and dancing lights. Fairy fire and darkness as they level up, which is pretty much standard for the drow across the board we've seen in the past. High elf gets the prestidigitation cantrip. In the past, High elf used to get a wizard cantrip of their choice. This is a little bit of a nerf in that aspect for options, but it's fine. But whenever they finish a long rest, they can replace that cantrip with one from the arcane spell list. So it's not exactly the same, but I do appreciate it. And plus, the arcane spell list has a little bit more than the wizard spell list had, so that's pretty good. Detect Magic and Misty Step, reminder again, all of these spells can be cast with spell slots. So as if you happen to be playing a High Elf Wizard, you'll basically have auto-prepared Detect Magic and Misty Step, which is great, which means you can cast them with your spell slots, and you get one freebie Detect Magic, so you don't have to worry about using that with like your using rituals for. You get the one freebie. And then the Wood Elf gets an increase of movement speed to 35 feet plus Druidcraft, and then Long Strider and Pass Without Trace. Very thematic, great spells for a Wood Elf type creature. I really appreciate that, and but it does kind of fly in the face of the High Elf and Wood Elf magic feats that were added in, was it Xanathar's? Because they kind of basically do the same thing. And then again, you have Trance, where magic can't put you to sleep. You finish a long rest in 4 hours, and that's that. Now, I will say that is different from what we've already seen from the updated kind of sub-race type elves, or the pseudo-elves, however you want to call them, from Monsters of the Multiverse, as well as the Astral Elves that just came out in Spelljammer, where their trance sort of gave them the ability to recall new either skill or weapon proficiencies or tool proficiencies during the course of the trance. These elves cannot do it, but they also have this sort of extra benefit at first level. So I think that's the offset, and I'd be okay if all of them in the future kind of ended up somewhere like this. Excuse me, the Gnome. I'm going to say I'm satisfied with the Gnome. Again, a similar thing, right? They have Dark Vision. They gave their Gnomish Cunning, I believe, used to just be advantage on Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws versus spells. It is now just across the board, which I think is pretty solid. And then their Gnomish lineage, which either have Forest or Rock Gnome. They also get to choose Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma for that. Forest Gnomes get Minor Illusion, and they can also speak with animals, proficiency bonus times per long rest, and then use spell slots, which kind of is a better version of what they had before, which was like you can talk to animals and they can understand you. This just kind of makes it a little more quantifiable. Then you have Rock Gnomes. They know the Mending and Prestidigitation cantrips, and they sort of have buffed out Prestidigitation to do sort of what the Gnomish Tinker ability used to do. Halflings, I'm just going to say I'm satisfied, excuse me, again, with the Halfling. They did the same thing, excuse me, that they did with the Dwarf, where they sort of pared it down, where you used to have 2 sub-races. I do think Halflings, actually, you know what? I'm going to say, yeah, I'll stick with satisfied. I do think like Halflings got the shortest end of the stick here, but it could be offset from the fact of their luck still allows them to reroll a 1 on a natural on a d20 test. And I think that part of the reason why they may have gotten less features overall is because now in the current rules, a 1 on a d20 test is an automatic failure. So that luck ability is just that much more useful compared to what it used to be. Because I believe some of them could also get resistance to poison on top of everything you see here. But advantage against saving throws for frightened, and then halfling nimbleness, you can move through the space of a creature that is a size larger than you. And then again, proficiency in stealth. I do feel like it is one of the poor, like the weaker races, as it is listed here. And I'm going to say that Orc, I'm satisfied with. It basically, again, this is the adjustments to the way half races are handled. Adrenaline Rush, they pretty much carried over, right? You can take the dash action as a bonus action. When you do so, you get temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. You do this proficiency bonus times per long rest. So you can take the dash action as a bonus action, which is great. And then again, it also gives you temp HP. Dark Vision, you get Powerful Build, and then Relentless Endurance if you go to 0 and pop. I'm going to say I'm very satisfied. It doesn't have the brutal kind of critical aspect or whatever it was called from the original half-orc, but I think this is overall just a better, more versatile option. And then Tiefling, I'm going to say I'm very satisfied with because it's everything that the base Tiefling had. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to change that to satisfied, and I will tell you why. It has everything that the base Tiefling had, and then some, right? So they all get the Dark Vision. They're all going to get the resistance to a damage type and the Thaumaturgy cantrip, which is basically what base Tieflings had. And they now basically made you have 3 options. Those options provide you resistance to a different damage type in either poison, necrotic, or fire. They all get a damaging cantrip at level 1, and then a spell at 3rd and 5th level, on top of the Thaumaturgy cantrip as well. So you can see that the Infernal Tiefling is essentially the Tiefling we had in the player's handbook. It's everything that was there, except they now also get the Firebolt cantrip, and you can see Chill Touch, Poison Spray, Ray of Sickness, Hold Person, False Life, Ray of Enfeeblement, All solid improvements overall. My only reason that I put it as satisfied as opposed to very satisfied is, again, the sort of downplay of all of the Tiefling variants from Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes that have basically just effectively been erased. Let's continue onward. How satisfied are you? Oh, it's going to be like this. How satisfied are you with the elements of the human character option as presented in the article? I'm going to say I'm very satisfied with all of them, because the only thing that humans had different was basically the extra ability score improvements if you chose non-variant human, and basically nobody did. So I'm going to say I think this does a good job of capturing the versatility of humans. I don't have any complaints there. Moving on. We have the Ardling. Angelic Flight, I'm satisfied with. I'm really just kind of satisfied across the board with all these. I don't really have anything crazy to say. It's all fine. Ardlings are fine. I just thought that Azamar were the angelic opposite of Tieflings. All right, let's see. What else? They do provide a bunch of versatile options for spellcasters, which I appreciate. I do think... yeah, no, I think that's good enough. I was going to say I wasn't sure how I feel about them events, like the elves that we just talked about, or the Azamar, but I think I'll keep that as it is. Dragonborn. Very dissatisfied. I'm satisfied with the breath weapon, satisfied with dark vision, dissatisfied. Okay. What's going on here? We changed the Dragonborn in Fizzbands, and I felt like those changes did a good job. We adjusted, let's see, the damage was adjusted for the breath weapon, and it could be used in place of an attack or a creature with multiple attacks. Making it a full action seems like an oversight, although without seeing the full rules for actions in combat, it's hard to judge. That's the truth, right? I have my judgments based on that, but I don't know. The Dwarf, I'm very satisfied across the board. I was sad to see the armor proficiencies go, but I do think this is a great combination of both previous dwarven subraces and is the best of both worlds, which is, again, also how I feel. Okay, moving on. Elf, great across the board. All things considered. I'm just curious about the design decision on the changes to trance when we just saw updates / changes in Monsters. Mordenkainen presents Monsters of the Multiverse. And even the Astral Elf has changes and Spelljammer. Why do the base PHB elves not have the versatility provided by those other newer versions of Trance? Okay, next. Satisfied, very satisfied, satisfied. I don't really have anything. I don't like gnomes personally, so I'm skipping that. I guess I can say that I feel like halflings are a weaker choice compared to the other races, and feel they lost the most when combining the two subraces, the two previously existing subraces. Okay. Next. Work. I have no complaints there. And then Tiefling is the same thing. We're about halfway done with this survey. I just wish we knew or had rules for adapting the old Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes Tiefling variants into this, as they seemed as they were some of my favorites. I see echoes of those variants here, but I'd like to see more options for a build your own Tiefling set of rules. Alright, that's that. Moving on. How am I satisfied with the character background section as presented in the article? I know what I am very satisfied overall. Okay, now we're into the background section. I am satisfied with ability scores, skill proficiencies, tools. Yeah, you know what? I'm very satisfied across the board for all of the backgrounds. I really like the new take on backgrounds. I really like the new take on background. I also appreciate that you provided sample options for folks who aren't interested in making up their own from scratch. The simple change to equipment and how much gold/items you have was excellent. And I do feel like that. Have I playtested any of these backgrounds? No, I have not. How satisfied? I mean, I don't care, being completely honest with you. I don't want to. I guess I'm just gonna say don't know, not sure. I have no interest in playing the predetermined backgrounds. I would just make up my own. So I was doing that for the longest time in the original 5e. So that's what I'm gonna say. I have no real interest in playing the predetermined backgrounds. I was always making custom backgrounds in 5e anyway, so I'm glad that it's so I'll continue doing that going forward. Okay. How I always used feats in 5e. Which of these feats have I playtested? Unfortunately, none. I think I'm very satisfied. Oh no, I'm not satisfied. I'm very dissatisfied with Savage Attacker. But everything else I'm fine with. Love the new take on feats and the level requirements. I hope this means that we'll be seeing more variety and a larger number of feats overall. Also hope this isn't the full list of level 1 feats, which is a truthful statement. I'm very satisfied with the D20 test. I like the concept of it. Oh, is this going to include... Oh, this doesn't... Okay, grappled I'm fine with. Incapacitated I'm fine with. Inspiration I was fine with. Really? All of these things I was fine with. Let's say, does D20 test incorporate crit hits? If so, I think I appreciate what... well, I'm just going to leave it at that. See if that's in a separate thing here. Ah, here it is. Rolling a natural 1, I'm fine with. Rolling a natural 20, I'm fine with. Dissatisfied with critical hits. I think that you're close, but I believe no crit hits for monsters isn't perfect. I think if there were some qualifiers there, I think there are some qualifiers there, like monsters of X CR can crit, or multiple versions, hardcore mode, monsters can crit, etc. That would make more people happy. Okay, next. I'm satisfied. I have no issues with the inspiration. I think that that's great. I actually ended up going back and adjusting my terminology here for the natural 20 critical hit conversation, and I figured I would just read through it. And I actually realized that I could go through this whole survey, fill out all the information ahead of time, and then I could just talk through it. So actually, I think this is what I'll do going forward. Instead of you watching me type everything out, I can just fill out the survey except for the last bit, and then come back to the start and do it that way. So here's my final piece that I wrote in here on natural 1s, natural 20s, critical hits. I think that you're close, but I believe no crit hits for monsters isn't perfect. I think if there were some qualifiers here, like monsters of XCR can crit, or multiple versions of the game. On normal mode, monsters can't crit. On hardcore mode, monsters can, etc. Or perhaps certain monsters have the ability to crit with certain abilities. Regarding recharge mechanics, will all monsters be updated to include a mechanic that allows for this new version of critting? Also regarding only unarmed strikes and weapons critting, does this exclude sneak attack and divine smite? What about smite spells, or spells that increase damage of a melee or ranged spell attack? Would these have special qualifying tags in their descriptions that would allow them to crit? Lastly, what about abilities that address previous rulings? Grave Domain Cleric, Adamantine Armor, Spores Druid, etc. These abilities were designed with monsters being able to critically hit, so it worries me how backwards compatible this new edition will be. Moving on to the next one, which was Inspiration. I like this a lot. I think the limitations and losing it on a long rest are a really nice way to force folks to actually use their inspiration, which I do agree. I find that when people have it, we have a video game mindset, right? Where we like, You want to stack up all your buffs and everything to get ready to use them for when you really need it, and then you finish the game and you never use them. This, I kind of think, when you lose your inspiration on a long rest, it's going to force you to use it, and the fact that you can only keep one and you can give it out to other folks as well. Regarding long rest, I said I'm very satisfied with this. I said I always use the current mechanics for interrupting that they have here for interrupting a rest, granting a short rest if an hour had passed. So I'm glad to see it as an official rule, right? So this is the concept: if you start taking a long rest, an hour has passed, and your rest gets interrupted, you still get the benefit of a short rest if at least an hour has passed. I've used that personally. I'm glad it's something official now. We continue on to the next bit, which was any additional comments, and I'm gonna say, I really like the general... I didn't want to finish this because I didn't know if there was more after it. I really like the general concept and outlook of these changes. I also appreciate your willingness to share and allow the community to help forge the future of the game we all love. You have made great strides to change the way you present content, and I am glad to see you doing so. It's hard to play test and judge with only a snapshot in time of future and without all mechanics, but as long as that's clearly stated, I think future UAs should be well received, which I do think is true. Hit next. Oh, there's more. Okay. What is qualification purposes? I am 36 years old. I am white. I identify as a man. And that is it. Submit. Thank you for taking our survey. All right. So there you go, folks. Sorry it took me so long, and the fact that I had to cut this together is going to take it a little bit longer by the time you ultimately see it because I had to edit the video. But anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions on this survey in the comments down below, and I will see you all next time.